Welcome to Cancer and Peace. My name is Sean Stewart, and I'm facilitating a conversation with our host, Peter Scalzo, 20-year cancer journeyer, survivor, and everything pretty good guy, although I know some of the other aspects of his character. But this is about cancer and peace, so we're going to stay in the vein, in the lane here, right?
Okay. I don't know.
That means we've been friends too long, right?
Yeah.
You're just laughing. It's like,
Yeah.
yes.
Yep.
If they could only hear the recordings of the background before some of these meetings, they would never listen again.
Yeah. Thank God producer Jack doesn't broadcast that.
Yes, for editing, we are grateful. And so we will, last week when we recorded, we worked through Lament quite a bit, and we were in Psalm 69, and we talked a bunch about the importance of lament, not a big characteristic in modern society that we think about. We spent a little time there, and we were working through this Psalm 69 because it was about David lament in his life. And there's just components of it that I think we were delving into there. I had a few thoughts as we go through. I think we're just going to try to finish out just covering this psalm. And one of the things that most people may not realize is the psalms are 2/3 lament, or something in that range. And we hit on this just lightly last time, is that not all of these laments end with a smiley face at the end. And how did that strike you when you heard that and thought about that?
Yeah. I think it's real, authentic.
Yeah.
I like that.
Yeah, what stuck out to me is that the number of times that we've had a conversation of, like, you've been leading a cancer support group. You have a co-leader now. We actually introduced her last week, just for a few seconds, or at least put her name out there. She didn't introduce herself, but we put her name out there. And how many times did the story end as an end of life journey, not as this bow of, everything was, healed and lived happily ever after? Of those stories, how does that look what are the percentages almost in cancer and peace? I don't want to be depressing, but it's like, this is the harsh reality of what we're wrestling with.
The interesting thing is, it's that dichotomy that I feel when I think back about those people who have done that journey of, like, almost like Ecclesiastes, there's a season for everything under the sun, but a time to weep, let's say, and a time to feel joy. And I think of those journeys like that. Like, if I remove myself from, I just want to see this person physically healed, to, I just want whatever God's will is for this person. Even though there were many times, like David felt in this psalm, like, I'm over my head. This is way too overwhelming for me. Those times, there were also, even in the end of life process, great times of peace, and even like an inner joy in that. So, like, I think about my own journey when I journaled out that awful time that I had in the hospital, and how the journal started out with, I can't do this. This is way too dark for me. But then in the process of working through those feelings and surrendering them and turning to God, there was always a time of, okay, well, this is what God has to say, which I think is really important for, that's why we're at least I am, and you are too, but we're advocates of having a higher power to turn to. And of course, for me, it's Jesus. And, we're part of the Christian faith that recognizes Jesus and how huge that is for the journey. But not the problem, and we've talked about this lots of times, is when we want to go from diagnosis to this place of euphoria, let's just say, and skip the deep valley. Yet God wants us to go down into that valley with each other and to experience those feelings and to voice them and to process them, right? And I think that's what David in this psalm, he goes into a deep, dark valley.
Yeah, I want to explore two or three of those items in there and see there were some things that stuck out in that space for me. And there's also something that seems like something I wouldn't expect when I had reread this, and I wanted to hit that. But let's talk about the valley for just a second. You gave some thoughts on that. Some verses or areas that you just see that sticking out to you that just resonated with you. If you have some off the top of your head there.
Well, I think what resonates for me. I mean, there's so many verses in this psalm, but I think my own experience is, and we've already talked about this, so I'll just briefly mention, but quicksand under me. So that feeling that I'm not on solid ground, I'm sinking, and I don't know what to do about it. And swamp water over me, like this is so overwhelming. There's nothing under me holding me up. And there's this swamp water, which to me is dark, yucky, depressing water over me. And it says, I'm going down for the third time. So it isn't like I went down one time or even two times, but it's this sense of I keep going down. And
yes.
And I love the fact that David, the writer, is willing to record these feelings that are so difficult, such tough emotions. And I remember feeling like, and I even have a line in my book where I said, I've been a failure so many times because I've dwelled in like depression going through this journey. If I could rewrite the book, I would change that line and say, I'm a human being going through this journey, and God wants me to process those tough emotions and to voice them. I mean, I think as a parent, if my child's going through a tough time, even as an adult, go ahead and give me the honesty.
Yeah.
Go ahead and tell me how bad it is,
Yeah.
I want to hear it.
I like that. That's good. There's an item in that same space, and it goes from, so we think about a cancer journey, it's I have a disease and it's life-threatening and it feels crushing. And then I read in this psalm this added burden, and it's I see it in 8. It's like, my brothers shun me like a bum off the street. My family treats me like an unwanted guest. And so the reason why this sticks out to me in the lament stage is like, it's not just the act of things falling apart, is now the world is out against me. It's that feeling in your life. It's like he's expressing to God now, even those closest to me they feel like they're against me, is what I really hear in this. And maybe in many ways, in David's story, they were against him, but not everybody. Mm-hmm. But there were those who, even in his own family, who turned against him. Mm-hmm. And does that relate to any of your personal experiences? You lament is like, I feel alone in this. I think is really what I'm hearing. It's like people I expected to support me in a certain way, maybe they didn't do that, or they weren't there in the way I had hoped, and I feel this aloneness. Does that part of lament? It's not just the disease itself, it's the people around me have disappointed me.
Yeah. I think like I'm not so quick to blame others for that phrase that he just said. I think it's very difficult for people to relate to exactly where I'm at.
Yes.
And I don't blame them for that. But I do think some people are better at sitting in the dirt and listening and being that presence. And so having that understanding. But I mean, I had a community around me of church friends and family who were highly supportive of me. But in that one surgery where it's 5% chance to live, tumors throughout, you're going to do an end-of-life process kind of thing, and you're in a long recovery in the hospital. I felt alone because no one could really relate exactly to that. And I think it would be, I don't think my expectation would be right if I said, why can't they relate? I think it's a situation where I found myself that there's not many people at all who could relate to what that feels like. Now, my son and my daughter were with me 24/7, which was an unbelievable, wonderful gift because it was just their presence, right? But I didn't expect them to speak into my life to somehow resolve what was going on in me. That was like something I had to do with God. It was a journey.
Yeah. I'm going to tread lightly here.
Yeah.
But I want to go into this just a little bit though, as that, and I don't actually want to let you share whatever details you want, but last week you shared a story of harm in our story work group.
Yeah.
And it was a lament too.
Yeah.
And that there was a great harm where, as you entered the cancer journey, one of your family members so close, harmed you.
Right.
And so I like the fact that you were able to see the support you had, but you had to lament that harm. You actually had to recognize it for what it was too. And that's what I see here. And what David's doing is he's not ignoring the harm that took place, because when I heard your story of harm, it really resonated on an emotional level. It's like, wow, that there was difficult. That was a very low place to walk through, because you really were at a low point and somebody just walked up and kicked you really hard.
Right.
There's
a few people in my life who, in 2005, when I had my first major surgery, who could have really come alongside in a very meaningful way, more than like my kids or brother or anyone. And one was my mom, and she was dying from cancer herself. And another, I'm not going to say the relationship, but that person didn't come alongside of me either. So I really felt alone. Yeah. And I look at this, and you have an expectation that your brothers won't shun you like a bum.
Yeah.
And that your family won't treat you like an unwanted guest.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, that's certainly you don't think your own family would do that. Mine didn't, but I mean.
No, but members of yours did. And that's the thing and it's not. Yeah. It's like there's both sides, and you actually had to lament that great loss, because that was the reason why you shared the story with this intimate group, and I won't violate the confidence of that, but I will say there's something there that you are having to lament and wrestle with. Wow. There was something here that really hurt bad, and it made this journey even harder.
Right. That's true.
And by entering that, you're now free to, to release that. Your soul's been enlarged in releasing that.
Yes.
I think.
Yes.
Because this is the concept we were talking about. Is like, how do you enlarge your soul through grief and loss? Is by admitting that. So I see David going right into this. There's something else that was really interesting to me about this, and I want to see if I can just find their there's a section here I'll just read this. He's talking about the people that had hurt him in this way. And he said, they put poison in my cup, vinegar in my drink. And this is where he starts asking God for something back. And he says, let their supper be bait in a trap that snaps shut. May their best friends be trappers who will skin them alive. Make them become blind as bats, give them the shakes from the morning till night. Now, I was like, what is this category of lament that he's expressing to God about those people who have hurt him? I'm just like, I think if we have to be honest, if we're going to look at this, we see the most pure expression of his deep feelings of revenge, of anger and frustration and desire for them to get what they deserve.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
How do you interpret that? What do you do with that?
I mean, imprecatory Psalms where David's like, I hate my enemies. You know what I mean?
Because skin them alive is what this said. I was like, that's pretty graphic, right?
Yeah.
let them have the shakes from morning till night.
Yeah.
That's what he asked.
Yeah.
What do you take out of that?
That it's healthy to be authentic and real. And it doesn't mean he's going to act on it or he's going to remain hateful, those kinds of things. Because, like, I was listening to this secular guy in the dating space talk about when you've been harmed by, in this case, it was his spouse, how he said, he was talking about unforgiveness. He's like, yeah, go ahead and be mad and even hate, but then you will need to exercise unforgiveness. And if you don't, you're going to reap huge negative consequences in your life. So, but there's this process. I mean, how can you forgive someone completely unless you feel what they've done, you express anger about it, and then you enter into a place where you can forgive and release? And I think that's what he's doing. He's recognizing the injustice. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think it's healthy to do that. Recognize it.
Okay, good. It's
acknowledge it.
I think it's important to understand what I like the way you phrased it is, can you get to the honest about what you really feel?
Mm-hmm.
Because when he expresses his feelings about what he would like to see happen, it doesn't mean that he's willing to act on them, but he's giving an expression of where his heart's at to God, and God already knew it.
Mm-hmm.
And when we play pretend, it's a form of stuffing the real, right? And so I think this is getting past the pretend. I'm with you on this. That's kind of where I interpreted this too. It's not that it's healthy to act out on revenge, but if you can't express how you feel about the situation, about the people around you, then you're probably living in a false world, a fake world. And this is what I see he's doing. I think that's really a powerful segment where he really gets into a level of depth about how he actually feels in the amount of hurt that he's taken on.
Yeah. Yeah.
He gets to verse 29. He says, I'm hurt and in pain. Give me space for healing and mountain air.
One thing before we get there, I just want to, I like how he says, don't look the other way. Your servant can't take it. I'm in trouble. Answer right now. I think about those times in my journey where I have said to myself, I can't do this anymore. I can't take it. I need to be rescued right now. And yet God has not answered that, delayed that. And how difficult it was, but building up in me something else.
And what is it you think he was building?
I think it was the ability.
I put you on the spot. That's why you're laughing.
Yeah, to have well, also how difficult of a lesson that is. And I'll pose it as a question: can I be patient and wait on God? Can I do that? Because sometimes the answer is no. I'm pretty bad at that, and sometimes it's yes. I can. I can wait. But sitting in a place of darkness. And I have a good buddy, you do too, who's 4 years now into a severe depression.
Mm-hmm.
He's crying out to God in the darkness.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I can't do this.
Yeah.
And yet God's doesn't say, okay, I'll bring you relief right now.
Yeah.
And I talk with him almost every day.
Mm-hmm.
And you know how it's building up something in him, though. A resilience, a patience, a forbearance, whatever label it is. But, I think it'll be something beautiful in the end. But to go through it is horrible. To travel with him in this, it's horrible.
Is it fair to say then part of lament is to deeply explore the purpose of suffering?
I want to be careful how I answer that,
mm-hmm.
because sometimes, like I know in my own experience, I didn't see any purpose or meaning in the lament.
Good. I'm glad maybe I'll rephrase it then.
Yeah.
to deeply accomplish the purpose of suffering.
That's different. And as I'm now where I sit today, I look back at a 20-year cancer journey. I see a great purpose in it. But there were times in the journey when I thought it was going to pass where I couldn't see any purpose or meaning in it. But now I absolutely do as I look back.
Yeah, I think you used the word wait in that, and the fact that there wasn't an immediate response is really telling about and what do we do while we're waiting. And sometimes it is this act of lament. It's getting to reality about our own lives. And so you see this, there's hyperbole in what he says, and then also you see a level of reality that comes clearly in. There's expressions of what he'd like to see happen, but probably not fully what he would like to see happen in a sense of in reality. And so it's like this clarity picture coming. But what really sticks out to me is, and I've been thinking about this for the great saints that are written to the Bible, is they had to wait. They had to wait for this process of maturing. And so if it was Moses, there was 40 years of waiting before he even began his ministry. And then there was 40 years of waiting in the desert, or the travel there. And if you look at David, he was anointed many years before he actually became the king. And he had to wait and suffer through that period of time. And you can pick Abraham, Joseph,
13 years prison, and
yeah, it's like as you start picking
Abraham,
up
25 years
yes.
before the Son of Promise came. Yeah,
it's just like these periods of waiting and
yes.
suffering. It's like you can't find people who had great, meaningful journeys that didn't go through suffering, waiting, and maturity. And so that's why I like the idea of accomplish. And so you get a little lens here from the Psalm of what it feels like to go through that, though.
Yeah.
As the purpose is being accomplished.
Yeah. Yeah.
You were going to point at something here, yeah.
You know, like you mentioned 29, I'm hurt and in pain. Give me space for healing and mountain air. He just wants relief, right? I mean, I know that. Mm-hmm. I just want to climb up that mountain, feel the air, and be over this issue, what's going on. Mm-hmm. He's like, let me shout God's name with a praising song. Let me tell his greatness in a prayer of thanks. And I think I'm not there right now, but I want to get there. And I think to me, there's a great amount of hope. Hope is an expectation, right? We've done episodes on it, but there will be a day. I don't know when, but where I get relief. I mean, that's the one thing about this earth journey. Like, if I have to deal with metastatic cancer for the rest of my life here on earth, there will be a day when I will be done with the journey. I'll be past, but there is going to be a time when I'm done. And so I don't know when that day is, and I don't know when that time will be, but there will be a time that I'll be done with this. This is a temporary space on a journey here on earth, which is not an eternal journey on earth. It's a temporary journey. I know that there's like listeners could be experiencing a really difficult relationship, a difficult job, a painful journey in the health context, whatever it may be. And it's so tempting to feel like my life is all about only this. This is it.
Yeah.
And yet, like the psalmist, David reminds himself, let me get to that point. In other words, almost like let me get there, but he's like envisioning, I think, in his mind, there will be a day.
Yeah, he's describing that, and I think that's interesting that he doesn't say today's the day.
Yes.
Because that's I think one of the mistakes that's shutting down the process of grieving lament is to say, hey, I'm going to skip that and go right to today's the day.
Right.
It's he's asking for the day,
Right.
and he's looking ahead and longing for the day is what I really hear, which is different than pretending it is the day.
Right. I mean, tomorrow, I'm 20 years into the journey. Tomorrow, I'll be at the hospital all day. I'll be with blood work, my oncologist, and then a doctor in the afternoon who installed an IVC filter for my blood clot. So I'm not done with the medical piece. And I was told way back when it became metastatic, and Sloan Kettering advised me twice to go home and call hospice, that it would be an ongoing, chronic, life-threatening situation. Like there's no cure for this cancer.
Mm-hmm.
So that if I was waiting for that moment in which I felt like, oh gosh, everything is great with the health, I'm done with that. No, I get some space when I don't get recurrences, but it's always something that's there. You know?
It hasn't gone away.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's really good. I wanted to, I'm going to jump down closer to the end now and just, when I read this and then thought about your journal, you put something in and you called it the Journal of Truths.
Yeah, Walking in Truth. Yeah,
Walking in Truth. And even when you wrote Walking in Truth, so I still laugh. It's like,
oh, the facts.
Yeah, the facts. So it's like, well, there were some things that weren't true there.
Fact one, yeah.
Yes, but it was still really good because I'm going to read this and I want to see if you see overlap or what it looks, because it says here, and I'm starting in verse. I'm going to start actually in 29, and I'm going to read there. I am hurt and in pain. Give me peace for healing and mountain air. Let me shout God's name with a praising song. Let me tell his greatness in prayer of thanks. For God, this is better than oxen on the altar, far better than blue ribbon bulls. And then it goes, the poor in spirit see and are glad. O you God seekers, take heart, for God listens to the poor. He doesn't walk out on the wretched. You heavens, praise him, earth, and ocean, all things that swim in it. For God is out to help Zion, rebuilding the wrecked towns of Judah. Guess who will live there? The proud owners of the land? No, the children of his servants will get it. The lovers of his name will live in it. Now, I just looked at that. I was like, oh, wait a second. What had you, as you were walking out that dark period, to me, there was this really overlap between what you wrote and what he was writing here. Or do you think, does that resonate with you between the two?
You mean my journal and what?
Yes.
I mean, I think that's the thing about hope, right? It's something he didn't see yet.
Right.
He was still in the pit.
He had to start writing truths out, even though he wasn't experiencing them.
And I think that was what God impressed upon me was, even though my diagnosis and prognosis didn't change, I had to write out those scriptural heart truths.
Yeah, we have this entire psalm where he gets to the most rawest of pain, suffering, and expressions of anger, bitterness, rage towards, revenge towards family and what he thought were friends. And you get to the end and he then points to, well, what do I know is true? And he's not living that yet when he writes this.
Yeah.
And I think this is such a great picture because I see the parallel with what you did in your journal. As you started out with, I don't want to go forward at all. It's dark and getting darker. You didn't see hope. You didn't see a way past where you were at. And your own words were you were ready to say, hey, can we shorten this period because it's too much?
Yeah.
And
I don't think you can get to the truth, like recognizing God and the truth, until you go through those feelings, those tough emotions.
explain. Yeah.
because that was my reality. That is a person's reality. And to just gloss that over, those feelings don't go away. Like we said, they're buried alive. And there's this gnawing, as I'll say it. If I don't fully process it, there's a gnawing in there that says, I can't go to that truth yet until I do this stuff first. I'm incredibly sad. I'm incredibly angry. I'm incredibly fearful. And I have to acknowledge all that and bring it out and talk about it with my higher power, Jesus. And then once I do that, I can get to, okay, those things have surfaced. I'm processing them. But this is also what you say in your word, Lord. You say this and this and this. These are promises I can hold on to.
It's teaching you how to lament.
Yeah.
Is to also walk in truth, even when you have such deep feelings. And I think that's this psalm doesn't end with the bow, but in some sense it does, meaning that those truths are real and they eventually played out. The bow wasn't, it's like, oh, I heard your cry, I see you're in pain, and let me fix it for you right now. It was, I cried, I had the pain, I'm still in pain. All I have to hold on to is the way I take this ending is what I am holding on to is I have the words that you spoke of truth over me and over who I am. That's all I have.
Yeah.
He ends on, that's what he has, not how it turns out. He ends the psalm on that note. And I think that's an interesting form, the way to lament is the rawness to where do we go with that raw, real when it's not fixed.
Right.
The reason why I just thought it was so fascinating was how much it paralleled what you did in your journal when you went through your darkest time in your cancer journey. Was you started out with the most raw places.
Yeah.
You expressed that rawness in ways that were emotionally powerful, meaningful, and you still didn't get an answer of hope.
Right.
In the way that of just a direct voice of hope or whatever. But what you were able to eventually do as you journaled along was, well, what I'm going to do is rely on what I know you have said as truth.
Right.
And you started walking in that.
Yeah, I mean, it was, I don't know how to survive. It was a survival mechanism. And when Johnny D brought me the empty journal, it was there. So I thought, I got to express this stuff. It's killing me. It's eating me out from inside. And so I just started to write it to survive. And then when I got it all out and I was like, how about not only surviving, but thriving just a little? How do I do that? And it was to grab a hold of hope and to say, okay, what's truth? Even though my situation looks bleak, what are some things that are guarantees for me? And that's what it meant to sort of travel in that. And, I mean, lately I've been thinking about Michael J. Fox and his Parkinson's journey and how he has really, what we see is kind of a victorious Michael J. Fox who speaks out on Parkinson's and raises money, and he's still married to the same person, and, but, I'm sure he went through the valley first, did all that processing. And I think, like in the cancer support space, if somebody gets stuck in sadness or anger, we're the first to recommend therapy or some outside help for that person. Fear, that kind of thing. Processing those emotions brings you to the place of peace.
Yeah,
and hope.
And stuck means you're not processing them. You are trying to stuff them, trying to avoid them, ignoring. That's what I would take it as stuck. Is that maybe a different definition, but that's the way I would. Is not moving past them. What we're really talking about is taking time to feel them, express them, process them, understand them, and then even though they don't go away, even though the suffering doesn't go away, what is true?
Right.
Is what I think this psalm is teaching about or showing how David walked through that. And there's there for a reason. And I think there's something about this whole process of grieving. I'm going to throw one more question out to kind of maybe close this out. What is it? And maybe it's too hard of a concept there, but what is it that you would say, how is your soul enlarged through the grief and loss of that moment and how this played out in your mind?
I mean, that's a great question, because I don't know how clear I am on the concept of my soul enlarging, but I will say that for me, I faced some of the greatest fears that I always had, and I felt the fullness of that fear. Mm-hmm. To have a life-threatening illness like cancer was always a great fear of mine, hospitals and treatments and all that stuff. And I stepped into that great fear that I had. And my life was enriched from stepping into that great fear that I had of processing sadness and anger, but just living in that great fear and realizing that I'm in the worst situation I thought was possible, and yet I'm living through it. And God's even working in my life and even blessing me in this. And it has totally changed or impacted my life in a profound way. If someone said, how was your soul enlarged? I'm not sure how to express it other than I've experienced peace where there should not be peace. I've experienced a heart intimacy with God that I didn't think was possible. You know, to be at the deepest pit in my life and to have God reach in and reveal himself to me was very, very special and very unique for me personally. And that enlarged my soul and my relationship with God. I mean, if someone said to me, how do you know God's real? I mean, for me, my answer is because I experienced him in the deepest, darkest pit of my life. That's how I know that he's real.
That's really cool. I'm going to rephrase a little bit just to see if as what I heard you saying, or I'm going to summarize it in what I heard and see if it resonates. As you started out, you talked about walking into your deepest fear. Mm-hmm. And as I listened to you talk at the end, you were talking about intimacy and closeness with God. And I think even others around you. And then it just kind of clicked. Well, the opposite of fear isn't, unfear, it's love. Mm. And so how is your soul enlarged? What I think you just summarized is you moved from fearful and fear driven to being a lover of God and others in a much greater way. And so your soul has been enlarged by your ability to love in a way that you haven't been before prior to this. Is that fair?
Yeah.
Interpretation?
Great. Yeah. Thanks. What are you going, facilitator? Thank you for that, facilitator. Perfect summary.
Thank everyone for listening today.
Thank you.
We just wanted to close out this section on lament, and just hopefully there's something in there where as you're going through your own journey that you are able to experience the depth of loss and suffering and the truth of God's love for you is something that you can experience also in the midst of that. And so we just pray blessings on everyone who is listening to this episode.
Thanks, Sean.
Amen.